Hey guys, welcome to the first installment of my PC build series, Pronage Part Guides, which is totally not a take on PC Part Picker. In general, if you're here watching this video willingly and not because of a bunch of PC Nazis that are forcing you to do so, then you should already know what a build video is. For those who don't really know and are here because of that, a build guide slash video is a written article slash video that gives you a list of computer parts for a specific budget and makes a video slash article by explaining why he or she has chosen those parts. Before we get to the build guide, be sure to check your wallet because a lot of these builds will eat away at your wallet faster than a Steam summer sale. Oh yeah, and please note that this build is conceptual and is not guaranteed to work. So if you're gonna build this, be warned because it could explode. Okay, without further ado, for the CPU I chose the Athlon X4 860K. If any of you guys haven't heard already, the dual core is on its way out, and it said it could take less than a year for dual cores to become the new single cores. One of the many reasons for this is because of the quote-unquote next-gen consoles, which use crappy AMD laptop 8 cores. And AMD, laptop, and crap should not be in the same sentence. But nonetheless, the dual core is on the way out. As a solution, I found a very cheap, highly overclockable quad-core, which is comparable to the popular Pentium G3258 in quad-threaded tasks, and is comparable in terms of overclockability. Just be sure not to burn the house down. For the motherboard, I chose the Asus A68M eMATX FM2 Plus motherboard, and with a cheap $35 price tag as of January 11, 2014, along with a large amount of memory compatibility, along with a decent amount of features, this motherboard is a suitable house for any FM2 Plus chip out there, one on a budget. Memory. Wait, what was the memory again? Give me a second. Oh yeah, it's the Corsair XMS3 4GB of DDR3 1333. Before you say, wait, this is a gaming build, you need at least 8GB of RAM if you want a decent experience. And you're right, to an extent. However, the point of this build is to keep the budget of $250, which I can't really do with the $250 budget. It just isn't possible. 4GB is still relevant in a lot of games, especially those that were made in the last console generation. We will be getting to upgrading the RAM later. For the storage, I went with the Western Digital RE3 250GB 7200 RPM HDD. As a user of a 5400 RPM HDD in my laptop, as well as a 120GB SSD in my desktop, I can assure you that 250GB is large enough for some basic gaming, and 7200 RPM is fast enough to get you there. However, if you're downloading more than 20 games or so, then I recommend getting a larger HDD. However, for budget's sake, 250GB is fairly good. For the graphics card, I chose, surprisingly, the MSI Radeon R7 260 1GB graphics card. For our budget, getting a decent quad-core along with a fairly good video card is definitely a bang for your buck. The R7 260 chipset by AMD is one of AMD's low to mid-range gaming cards. It isn't really something that can tackle the latest games at 1080p high settings, but it is something that could do it at medium-low settings or at 720p. However, one main concern I have for this card is the amount of VRAM that's packed with it. 1GB isn't quite enough for intense 1080p gaming, so expect yourself turning down the resolution or anti-aliasing for this graphics card. However, considering the price point this graphics card comes at, it's pretty amazing. Finally, for the case slash PSU is the Logitech CS206BK ATX mid-tower case, along with a 480-watt Logitech PSU. Just as a warning, this PC's PSU could blow up and catch fire at any time, so if you want to keep your house, I suggest replacing this PSU at once. Nonetheless, I think that for $30, this case/PSU combo is not something you can ignore, especially when making a budget build. In fact, other people have created light gaming builds with this case/PSU and succeeded. However, even though this is great for the money, I would recommend you replacing it after a while. This build definitely requires some upgrading, so if you're up to it, here's a list of upgrades from most important to least important. Number 1, EVGA 430 watt 80 plus certified power supply or eco power supply, $15 to $30. One of the biggest flaws in this build, in my opinion, is its PSU. The PSU is packed with the case we chose, which by itself removes its credibility as a power supply. The EVGA 430 watt is one of my personal favorites in budget builds, and is the PSU I recommended to a friend of mine for his gaming build. So far it's working well. In my opinion, spending $15 or so on damage prevention is a lot better than wasting $250 worth of parts, or maybe that's just me, I don't know. 2. Plus one Corsair XMS3, 4GB of DDR3 1333 RAM for $25 to $35. Remember when I said I was going to get to upgrading the RAM? Well, this is where I'm going to be talking about it. If you want to do light gaming such as emulation, source engine games, or 2012 or later games, then you can skip this part. But as a rule of thumb, you generally need at least 8GB of RAM to do some serious gaming. So what you can do is add another stick of 4GB of RAM to get 8GB of RAM, making dual channel RAM. The price isn't too crazy, and the difference between choppy gameplay and smooth as butter gameplay is worth the price, in my opinion. 3. 1TB 7200 RPM HDD or 120GB SSD for $40 to $60. As I have said earlier in this build video, the storage in this build isn't exactly large and is only adequate. If you want to store more than 20 or so games, you will need to invest a little bit more money on another hard drive, which will set you back $40 or so. However, the benefits that come with this are large. Large. As in, you can actually store the absurd amounts of Steam games that you have in your library, and if you want an SSD, then you'll be getting 30-second boot times or less, plus the extra 120GB, which isn't that bad. That's an extra, 8 games or so, depending on the size, of course. There are plenty of other upgrades you can make with this build, such as a better graphics card or even a better processor. Maybe you want this to be in a compressed space to get an IoT